Welcome to Chamber Chat. This is John Tayer, President and CEO of the Boulder Chamber, and I welcome you to our bi-weekly conversation with those people in the community who are helping to support our businesses, strengthen our economy, and lift our entire community. And today we're going to have a conversation about the arts community, arts and culture to be specific, and how they support our economy. And we have wonderful folks to talk to about that subject. First of all, we have Matt Chasansky, who is the manager of the Office of Arts and Culture for the City of Boulder. And we have Deborah Malden, who is the Arts Liaison and Advisor to the Boulder Chamber. So looking forward to a conversation with the two of you. But before we do, a couple of quick announcements from the Boulder Chamber. So first of all, we have some exciting events. One of them is Beer with Me, Beer with John, on November 17 at 4 o'clock. That's going to be out in Longmont at a wonderful new member, part of our equity amplification program, and that's Outworld Brewing. And they have a great science fiction themed brewery out in Longmont, and we look forward to seeing you out there. It should be a great time. Informal chit chat with me and a beer. Second, on November 18, we have our business before hours. That's for people who like to get up early and network. And we're going to do it online virtually. And we're going to do something that's become very popular. It's called virtual speed networking. And it's all about introducing yourselves to the other business leaders in our community, making valuable business-to-business connections. So that's on November 18th, business before hours. And then finally, not but least, is on December 2nd from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. we have our annual Women's Night of Connection. And this is a wonderful get-together at Rembrandt Yards. Oh my gosh, it's going crazy here in the outdoor conditions. It's a wonderful chance at Rembrandt Yards to get together with business women leaders in our community for networking, for inspiration, and just to build your friendship, social connections. So get out there on December 2nd at Rembrandt Yards. Make sure to register online at the Boulder Chamber website. Okay, enough of the marketing from the Boulder Chamber. Now we're ready to talk about arts and culture in our community and how important it is to the strength of our economy. And I'm going to start with you, Matt.
Good.
So the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts, thank you, just came out with a wonderful report which describes in detail the economic impact of the arts across Colorado, really. And they said that in 2019 there was about a $2.3 billion economic activity impact on our economy from arts and cultural activities. Mm-hmm. That dropped to something like, what was it? It was $1.5 billion in 2020, obviously due to COVID. But I'm just wondering, given those numbers, what does that tell you about the impact on the economy of Boulder from arts and culture?
Yeah, and thank you for paying attention to this issue, because it's been really quite scary what's happened in the past 2 years. In Boulder, we had, before the pandemic, really strong indicators about the role that arts and culture plays, right?
Sure.
So we had tens of thousands of jobs in the creative sector, with 4,500 of those being professional artists running small businesses, basically gig economy workers in the arts.
Yeah.
Third highest concentration in the country.
Wow.
And when we take a look at like the arts nonprofit area of the arts sector, that was about $67 million in direct economic spending.
Wow.
So, not the biggest industry in town, but a keystone industry for sure.
Absolutely.
And all of the things that happen with cultural tourism, with the 1 million people who visit, 1.3 million people who visited Boulder because of the arts, right?
Wow.
And so this line of reasoning of the impact the arts were having was really clear and growing right up until March 2020.
Yeah.
And we saw the same sort of impact that is reflected in that report here in Boulder, with about a 50% retraction in the job market.
Wow.
And the loss of millions of dollars in revenue. And I think the thing that the report really makes clear that's actually statewide and here in Boulder as well is the loss of about a decade of growth instantly during that. And it was not only like the sensibility was that it's lost ticket sales, it's like people not paying for tickets, but that was only part of the story. Because a lot of arts groups like pivoted, went online, did some creative things outdoors. There was also the loss in revenue to our venues, like people renting the venues is a huge loss in revenue, and these like hidden things that happen. So the loss in jobs, the loss in revenue was really dire. At the same time, there were some pretty brilliant things that started to come out of that, right? And like this pivot online resulted in new ways of doing business that are going to continue long after the recession, right? And that the ability of local and state and national government to mobilize grant funding and some rescue funding, create Boulder local organization like doing matching funds with the city's own programs. Like there was all these creative things that came about as like sort of the rescue for that. But then the last piece of it, which I think is really important, is that the lessons learned are going to be very long term, because these are some of the same things that we're going to be dealing with climate change adaptation. And so the arts organizations, their impact on the economy are going to continue, but we need that to shift like every other part of the economy into that adaptation. So learning how to do things in different types of weather conditions and adapt your business, they're all lessons. So it's been good and bad. But I think the core message of the report and what matters to Boulder is we're not out of the woods. And so there's still more to be done, and we still need to like sort of keep up the passion and the pace of supporting these organizations and the artists in our community. It's going to be really important in the coming years.
I agree, and so let's talk about some of the ways we are supporting. But before we do that, you speak about the innovation and the creativity of the arts that help them get through this challenging time. And Deborah, you speak so eloquently in your role at the Chamber, but also on the SCFD board, about the impact on community vitality generally from the arts and how that helps lift our economy and our businesses. And I wonder if you could share some of that with our Chamber Chat audience.
Sure, happy to.
Wonderful.
So, look, if the pandemic proved nothing else, it proved the value of the arts to our individual well-being and to our community's well-being. And in a community like Boulder, which is so arts-rich and has such a high density of artists, the impact was particularly acute, combined with our coming to terms with the racial injustices as well as the King Soopers shooting. This was a community that was really hurting. And the arts lifted our spirits. So there's the mental health component, but there's also the reality, and there's decades of research that shows this, that the arts build cohesion in a community. They enrich our community in multiple ways. We could talk about increased civic engagement. Communities that are rich in art have greater participation in their local governments. It's a source of pride for our community, and it's also a source of solace and connection. So people during the pandemic were so desperate for connection. And what Matt talked about, the organizations and artists who pivoted to online, what's so incredible is that they were so committed to their community and they continue to provide these benefits. But I will say that they weren't able to monetize it. So while the generosity of our artists and their ability to innovate and to continue to produce wasn't really matched by their ability to earn revenues. There's decades of research that shows that children who have arts-rich education have better educational attainment, and this is across all socioeconomic groups. And the arts are really at the forefront of addressing the equity and diversity and inclusivity needs, particularly in a community like Boulder. So there's not a single area of challenge that the community is facing that the arts don't play a role in and can play a continued role in addressing the solutions.
Really inspiring. And I will say that, obviously we then see, based on what you said, but what Matt's earlier comments, that the arts are a critical element of our economy, but just also our quality of life, and yet they're struggling. So I'm just wondering, Matt, what is the city planning on doing through its programs and resources to help keep the arts and culture vital in our community?
Well, we've done a couple of things that we think need to continue, first of all. That we have created some flexibility in our grants program so that arts nonprofits and individual artists can take better advantage of the grants and use them in different ways to be resilient. We've also done some things on direct commissioning and direct spending on the arts. For instance, we started the Creative Neighborhoods COVID-19 work projects, inspired by the WPA of the 1930s, but we directly commissioned artists to do work for their neighbors that build those connections, help people deal with the stresses of this time. Yeah. So we want to continue to do some of those things and leverage our public art program, our programs for individual artists, all of that. But there's probably some new things that we're going to bring online. So we're taking a look at things like the ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act. We've got, like every city, a pool of money from the federal government to spend on infrastructure, on the losses that were incurred by municipal governments, but also on the businesses worst hit by the pandemic. And the arts is one of those businesses. And so we're going to be bringing forward some new funds and some new strategies based on that ARPA funding. So we're trying to look at all the different resources. But to your point, Deborah, is that we also are examining the arts as a social infrastructure component, right? And so knowing that things like the neighborhood programs or cultural assets in our communities and our venues, these are things that not only build connections, but those connections have all these effects out in public safety, in resiliency, in the ability to adapt to climate change, in the ability to check up on your neighbors. Like once you connect with the arts and know each other and have those things that you share in common, it actually has all these benefits out that are important to our community, our priorities, but also are things that are going to make us a better, more resilient, more viable economy on the other side of this. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to get the people who need the help most to get us through this. And then on the other side, we need to pivot again and decide how all these things transform one more time. And so we're in the middle of that moment of just before we need to change again. And we need to keep our eye on that, right? Be ready for further change.
I totally hear you. And it's interesting. I mean, it's both of you alluding to the need to support artists and arts organizations to help them drive their economic impact, but at the same time, what they're doing is making us more resilient, stronger, to then lift our economy, lift our community as we get through this pandemic
it's a new way to measure return, on these investments.
I love it.
But can I just add something? So in the Great Recession, following the Great Recession, there's data that shows that communities that were rich in the arts and supported the arts, they recovered faster. And it's not just supporting the arts, we're supporting our arts businesses. They generate revenues for our community. So every dollar that's invested in the arts generates multiples of economic activity for our community. And when you think about the arts, there's data that shows that those who attend arts events, they spend more in the local community than, let's say, those who attend a sporting event. So we think of sports as being important to the economy of Boulder, but actually the arts drive the economy. They keep our restaurants busy, they keep our retailers selling goods, and all of that not only generates activity for the community, it also generates income for the city.
Absolutely.
Right, and supports other services.
So, keeps those small businesses going, the restaurants, the retailers.
Right, and also in a community like Boulder, which is so based on the innovation economy, creativity is such a valued skill, right? And across the country, 90% of employers are valuing creativity as a top skill that they're looking for. So it's critical in a community like Boulder, and nothing breeds creativity like having arts in your community, and attracts the kind of talent and allows us to retain the kind of talent that we want,
and
talent,
also, and then the businesses that
and it makes our community more fun. We don't talk about fun that much, but actually when
fun is very important.
It's really important. It's really, and people are thinking about, well, do I move to Austin or do I take a job in Boulder?
Where there are these cultural attractions that make it a dynamic place to live, aside from necessarily the outdoor opportunities. Well, let me ask you this, Deborah. So Matt talked about some of the government programs that are being stepped up to support the arts and arts community. Wondering if there's things happening outside of government, and if you can describe those, and then maybe how business community leaders might get involved in supporting those efforts.
Sure. So, full disclosure, I am on the board of Create Boulder, an organization Matt spoke to earlier. But Create Boulder launched in response to the pandemic And we raise money for relief funding for artists. We joined the city in supporting their Creative Works project in the community, WPA-like fund. We also provided general operating support grants, and we leveraged our support by joining regional relief funds. And really the results were significant. We invested about $100,000 of money we raised through the city as well as through private philanthropy, and we brought over $400,000 back into the community. So that was really significant. And it was because we were working with others in the community who were interested in making sure that there was relief funding at a time of acute need. So that's continuing. In addition, one of the issues in our community, as you know, is affordability. And we've known for years, it shows up in the community cultural plan, that there's a lack of workspace, there's a lack of studio space, and rehearsal space. And I've been thinking that as businesses are thinking about how they use their space and their need for space may be changing, there may be opportunities for businesses to actually house some artists. Their artist in residence program. You might remember that Celestial Seasonings a few years back did an artist in residency that the chamber helped facilitate. And there are spaces that theater groups might be able to use for rehearsal. Right now they're going outside of Boulder because it's expensive. Well, if the space is available, that's an opportunity. And certainly there are opportunities for businesses to support programming and to support possible capital investments. There are a few arts organizations in town that are expanding or relocating, and so, or businesses that are looking to both increase their visibility and really demonstrate their support for creativity and their community. I don't think there's a better investment than they can make than putting money into the arts, because it shows the value not only to the community but to their employees, that they value what arts and culture bring to our community.
I love it. If I could add, there's all these ways that your viewers can help, right? And donating and contributing, but also like going to a performance, buying some art, visiting a museum. For your clients or for your employees and getting tickets, like that's what's going to bring this around and make sure that's still a vibrant part of Boulder.
I love it. Well, you two yourselves as art leaders in the arts and cultural community are driving success in making sure that we have a vibrant arts and cultural environment. And we see how many ways that impacts us economically, in terms of community resilience and strength, but also just fun. And so it's been a fun conversation with the two of you. Thank you so much. And thank you to our Chamber Chat viewers. And just one last announcement from the Boulder Chamber. So we have lit the Boulder Star, which is on Flagstaff Mountain, for the holiday season and in recognition of our veterans, hence my bright sort of holiday type tie. But want to ask all of you to make sure to watch the star from afar. Why? Because we need to protect the area around the Boulder Star and make sure that we maintain those environmental values that are also important to our community. So with that final announcement, I say thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next time on Chamber Chat.